It was a conversation that happened 3 or 4 times over 3 or 4 years actually. It took a bit of time. We were a fairly small organisation with one main contract, and we felt that we needed to look at what we were doing really as an organisation and what was the best option for us going forward. As a trustee, we've obviously got a responsibility for the organisation and our service users. So whilst thinking about what does NIF at the time do, what structure and direction do we need to go in, we looked at many different options. Then an opportunity arose where our chief exec resigned, and as a board we then made a strategic decision to really look at the options that were available to us. And by doing that, it gave us the opportunity to put interim chief exec in and let them investigate what the best option for NIF was at the time.
In the past, we've looked at, we went quite a long way down the road of setting up a social enterprise. So we'd really got there, we'd got somebody started work and employed, and then we had to pull the plug, which was a brave thing to do, but it suddenly wasn't going to be viable anymore. So we've been looking for several years really about how we were going to change and do something a bit different. So after that hadn't worked out, we thought, right, okay, we need to be looking possibly for a merger, or looking for somebody at least to work in very close partnership with that may ultimately lead to merger.
On an annual basis, I would always work with the board to think about, as a charity, are we still relevant? Are we still serving our members and beneficiaries the best we can? And do we still have a role in the sector? And last year, when we started to do that review, we were also approached by North Yorkshire and York Forum to meet with them. They had an interim chief exec, and we were curious to find out if there was a way we could work closer together, because the sector in North Yorkshire is quite crowded, and we felt that we might have a role in helping to consolidate some of the infrastructure support for the county. So the year before, we'd had a similar conversation, and I'd opened discussions with North Yorkshire and York Forum at the time, but the chief exec then wasn't keen to merge. He felt they were in quite a strong position, as was Rural Action Yorkshire. And I guess it was a case of, well, we're both in a strong position, why would we merge? But actually, I think one of the things we've learned is it's much better to merge in a strong position than in a crisis position. It felt like the right time in the sector. There were a lot of changes economically. Local authorities were receiving less funding, so they were contracting less funding to the voluntary sector, and we were very dependent on one key funder, so it felt like the right time.
When our chief exec came to us and said, look, I think I've found some people that would be another organisation that we work well together, I think they're decent people, I think they've got similar values to us, why don't we have a look at these guys? We went, fine, let's go and do that. We set up a merger working group, and actually with several trustees from each side, and we quickly came to be working well together, and we'd be sitting there and going, oh yeah, absolutely, quite agree about that, yeah, oh yeah, we think like that too. So quite quickly we felt a rapport with the trustees from the other organisation. So that really helped us enormously in moving things forward. If we hadn't felt that and felt some empathy with them, then it might not have happened at all. There were things that they did that we didn't do. We weren't going to be treading on each other's toes. We'd been working in partnership with them before. So actually we were going to be building on everybody's strengths.
I think the emotional thought for me was very much about, will North Yorkshire and York Forum and Rural Action Yorkshire staff get on? Culturally, are we similar? The Rural Action Yorkshire staff have always been incredibly flexible, they adapt to change well, they go the extra mile, and they're really used to a kind of culture of working whenever our clients need us. So if a parish council meets in the evening, we meet in the evening. If they meet on a Saturday, we go on a Saturday. And we needed a partner that worked in the same way as we did. So from that point of view, emotionally it felt right. The conversations, we felt like we kind of clicked. From a kind of business sense, it also it made sense because we were doubling key funders. So they had key funders, we had key funders, and that income diversification was always going to be a positive, really. So once we'd worked out that we were very similar organisations, but we had complementary services, it all happened really quickly. It became very easy to move forward because there were really no egos involved. So they had an interim chief exec, and right from day one it was clear that as chief officer of Ray I'd become the chief exec of Community First Yorkshire, and both boards were kind of relying on that happening.
We interviewed 2 or 3 organisations, and IVAR came out as the people that we chose, based from London, so they were completely independent to what was going on, but their reputation really came before them. They'd done a lot of this work before. We talked to other organisations that had been involved with them, and they recommended that they would be really good at what they did.
Having IVAR in was one of the best decisions that we made. We knew they were really good, so they were a known quantity. We knew that they knew our network, so they wouldn't have to be filled in with all that back stuff. And actually having people who were completely independent and actually out of our geography, because for sort of political with a small p reasons, not having somebody from our own county in our circumstances was much better. Somebody had a much broader perspective, and they could just be so clear-cutting and concise and cut through a whole lot of the detritus that was muddling our view. That's not a luxury investment, it's an absolute essential.
And they came in and they pointed out several of the things that we weren't doing, which was really helpful, particularly at a very early stage. So I can't emphasise enough, get expert external help early, because by doing that you save yourself so much time and effort further down the line. And they certainly did that for us. And they helped structure a few things. With a merger, it can be a bit tense. You've got trustees who are always thinking, am I going to be involved in the new organisation? Am I not? What does this mean for us? How is that going to affect our service users? How's that going to affect where we have our meetings, when we have our meetings? All of those sorts of tensions IVAR really helped us deal with, because they were completely external and unbiased. Once we've worked out who we were going to merge with, is how do we then put that structure together? What type of organisation is it going to be, the new one? Because ultimately you're creating a new organisation. So what structure do we want legally? How do we want our constitution to form? So those were very serious questions that needed to be answered very, very early on.
The suggestion that came from IVAR was that if you're having the chief exec of one organisation, you should have the chair of the other to balance things out, and that seemed perfectly logical. And so that's what we did.
There was never a kind of, well, I want the chair's role, you can have the chair's role. Jan was very generous in her approach, in that she, from day one, she always said she was willing to give up the chair's position, because her only concern was that we would have a good, strong organisation with a good set of trustees.
That did make a difference, I think, in terms of how quickly the process was able to be taken forward.